Welcome back to the second half of NEWSBREAK Live, and joining me is Domenica Megerdichian, who is the liaison for the Social Services Commission for the City of Torrance and also the Management Associate from the City Manager's Office. Once again, the city is participating in the 2018 homeless count, and this year is different, correct?
Yes. Hi, Hiba. Thanks again for having me. So this year, as usual, the Greater Los Angeles Homeless Count, which is coordinated on an LA County basis by the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, or LAHSA, is taking place next week over 3 days and 3 nights. And on Wednesday, January 24th, the City of Torrance will be hosting a deployment site for the very first time.
What does that mean, deployment site? Because the city has participated for years.
That's right. The city's been involved for the last 4 years in the count. We've had our Torrance Police Department, city officials, city staff, community members all participate in this effort, but it's the first time that the Social Services Commission went to City Council and requested that we partner with LAHSA, host a deployment site, which means deploying and training our volunteers here at a Torrance facility to get a little bit more involved in the local efforts with counting the homeless in our region.
And to help do this count, volunteers are needed, and for the event next week. So tell me a little bit about that, the participation. You've taken part in this before. What can people get out of this?
Yeah, of course. As you mentioned, last year was my first year personally volunteering in the homeless count, and it honestly gave me such a different perspective of the state of homelessness. So the homeless count at the local level needs about 65 to 125 volunteers just for the Torrance site. Across LA County, over 8,000 volunteers are needed to be able to count every single census tract in every single city. And it really needs to be a regional effort. By becoming a deployment site, the City of Torrance is saying, hey, we'll host the site, we'll give you a facility. We're partnering with the Family Promise of South Bay, who will be the site lead, coordinating the volunteers and sending them out, making sure that they're all trained to do this. We're partnering with the Torrance Police Department, the community lead detail, who works on all of the quality of life issues that affect our businesses and our residents and our schools. And now we're really reaching out to the community and saying, this is an opportunity to participate. This is an opportunity to get involved, to really give back to your community and to count the local homeless. This is something that's affecting municipalities on a regional basis. We know that homelessness doesn't end at our jurisdictional boundaries. And so to be able to address it properly, we need to all have a concerted effort.
And I know for homelessness is a topic that many people don't like to discuss, but it's something that cities across Los Angeles County do face, especially nowadays. So why is it so important for the city to continue to make these efforts? Right.
As I mentioned, the first homeless count actually took place in LA County in 2007, but really started taking place in our region and in Torrance in 2013. Over the last 4 years, as I mentioned, we've had a pretty good involvement in terms of the police department and people at City Hall, also some community members. But to see, the year-over-year data that we are collecting, to be able to have that snapshot, this is really the closest thing that we have to a census of the homeless population. And without that data, you kind of become reactive. So by doing efforts like this and really getting out there, spending some time knowing the people, collecting this demographic data, we're able to become more proactive, which helps guide all of the resources and the funding and the outreach efforts to the people who need it most. Once we have that information, we're able to make sure that we divvy up those resources, make sure that we're doing our best to get people out of homelessness.
And that's really important, especially it's one of the focuses of the Social Services Commission that the City of Torrance now has. So if you want to talk to me a little bit about that, how long it's been around, and the homeless population is just one population they focus on.
That's right. So the Social Services Commission was created by Council in 2016, and we have been very busy over the last 2 years. As you mentioned, the homeless population is just one of the populations. It actually focuses on 4 populations. So the homeless, the veterans, adults with developmental disabilities, and children with special needs. Rather than becoming a service provider like some other municipalities are, we know of the plethora of service organizations in our area that service our local community. And rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we are focusing on connecting our community members with the existing services that are out there. So our commission is very involved with the homeless count next week. We hosted a veterans event in November. We have a toiletry drive coming up in March to help gather the items that a few local service providers need to help the homeless community. We're putting together a resource guide. We're hoping to put that online so that community members have a go-to place to find all the resources available to them. And this is just some of the things that it really just scratches the surface. I think in 2018, we're gonna reevaluate and see what else we can do to help all 4 populations. So definitely been very busy as a commission.
Sounds like a lot of great work being done by the city and the commission. And speaking of the homeless count, for viewers that are tuning in right now, it's happening next Wednesday. And it's a very unique event, I would say. I've seen video of it. People are literally out in the field walking miles or in their cars, trying to find and do this survey. So what is the count like when you're out there? You've done it before.
Sure. So this is a huge undertaking that LA County takes over. So participation, like the city of Torrance, really helps at the local level. So during those 3 days, during the daytime, the professional service providers go out and they count the areas that regular volunteers necessarily wouldn't know how to count. They go down the riverbanks, they tally up the people who are in the homeless shelters. They really collect more demographic data on an individual basis. Then at night, depending on what service provider area you're in, so Torrance, we're having our count on Wednesday evening, we have our volunteers come to our deployment site. They get trained, they are put into groups, they're given their census tracts that they need to cover. And then with their groups, they get in their cars, and each group is divvied up. So you have a driver, you have a navigator, you have people who are in the car who are counting the people you see on the street. And most of the tracks can be counted by the car, but really depending on location, you might have to walk just a little bit. The Torrance Police Department will be there. The Community Lead Officer Detail, as usual, will be very involved with this, verifying the numbers, going to any calls, assisting with any questions that may arise. And then we'll have city staff at the deployment site with Family Promise of South Bay representatives to be able to call every single group, check in during the night, make sure everyone has what they need for a successful event. I also want to mention that we've also partnered with South Bay Coalition to End Homelessness. They are doing this effort more on a regional basis, but they have just been so great to the Torrance community, and we definitely want to give them a shout out, as well as First Christian Church, who has been the deployment site for the count for the past few years, and we definitely appreciate all of their efforts in our community.
And speaking of that, this year it's at the Ken Miller Recreation Center.
That's right.
So does that mean you're hoping for a bigger turnout, or?
Definitely. We're definitely trying to get the word out. We're trying to make sure that all the community members, city staff, neighbors, friends, everyone comes out. It's really easy to register. You don't need to have any previous experience. You get all the training, all the refreshments, everything that you would need the night of the count, and you're sent out in groups. I've had some people call with concerns that is it safe to go out? What's my experience going to be like? And I did it for the first time last year, and honestly, it is such a great experience. You definitely, it's a humbling experience, but you definitely gain a different perspective. But yeah, so Ken Miller Rec Center, just sign up online and we'll take all the volunteers. We do ask that minors are accompanied by an adult, but once you register online, you'll be sent an email with everything you need to know and how to come prepared to do the count.
And this is 3-4 hours of your evening, right? So it's not like a whole day event, 3-4 hours of volunteer work.
Definitely, and the more volunteers we have, the bigger the groups can be, and technically that should add to counting faster and getting through it faster, but it doesn't take all night, and it's a very organized and coordinated effort. It's pretty amazing how much ground you can cover, but minimum number is 65 volunteers, up to 125 volunteers, and like I said, we have a lot of community members and our own local organizations that are going to be heavily involved.
Can people walk in that day and say, hey, you have decided I want to help out? Obviously, they can go to theycountwillyou.org. So what are the different places people can register and sign up? And what's the criteria? I know you mentioned minors.
Sure, of course. So in terms of criteria, really anyone who's interested in participating can volunteer their time, other than minors who need to sign up with an adult. It is super easy. You just go on www.theycountwillyou.org and you sign up as a volunteer. You don't have to RSVP to a specific site, but you can. The organization does ask that you register ahead of time just so that they can gauge how much material they'll need, gauge if they need to send any, deploy any extra volunteers to make sure that we meet our minimum numbers. And yeah, everything is super organized and coordinated as soon as you get there. So beyond registering and signing up online ahead of time, that's really all the prerequisites that you need to be involved.
Sounds like a great event. The Torrance City Cable crew will be out there as well. And you touched upon this earlier, but why is combating homelessness such an important mission for the city? I know you talked about it earlier, but kind of getting the word out again to viewers at home who may be interested in taking part.
Of course. I think a lot of people have learned over the last few years, have read that this has become an epidemic. And it really is something that affects every single municipality across the region. I don't think there's one city across LA County that has not had some kind of experience with homeless population or the homeless count rising. And being able to count the population, being able to collect just that snapshot in time to know what that looks like in your community helps our first responders, our service providers really figure out, okay, this is our limited number of resources. How do we best use what we have? Who do we need to reach out to first? How do we get these people out of homelessness? What is it that we can address? And really helps them be proactive and on a concerted level where different agencies are working together versus spinning their wheels or trying to reinvent the wheel each time. This way we are managing and trying to address this issue altogether.
Domenica, is there anything else you'd like to add about the homeless count that's happening next week?
I urge anyone who has any interest in this to call City Hall. You can call me at the City Manager's office if you have any direct questions about this or you want to talk a little bit one-on-one. You can always reach us at 310-618-5880. Go online, read about it a little bit. If you have any interest in it, please don't hesitate to sign up. You can come to the training. You can at least see what that's all about if you're interested in participating maybe next year. But definitely do your part, get involved, help your community out. And we appreciate everyone who considers that.
And before we go, since you mentioned the training, it is a very detailed training and the survey is actually very detailed. I've seen it myself. Is there any information you can add about that before we go?
You know, I think they were working on improving the training this year, but once the group that has registered for each site arrives at the deployment site, we watch a video, they let us know, how do you count people? How can you tell if someone is homeless? If you see an encampment, how do you tally that down? You have the paperwork right in front of you. It's very clear how you put it all down. And then we turn in all of our paperwork to LASA and they do the count and whatever it takes to make sure that they can verify those numbers.
Well, thank you so much for your time and I really hope more people come out next week and lend a helping hand.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Again, as Domenica mentioned, if you would like more information, you can go to theycountwillyou.org. You can get more information there and you can sign up as well. Well, that does it for NewsBreak Live. And if you ever have news or video that you'd like to share, please email us at newsbreak@torranceca.gov. For Facebook and Twitter users, use #NewsBreakLive. Have a great night.